In a city full of glittering skyscrapers and endless opportunities, there lived a man who seemed to have it all. He was a billionaire tycoon, a man whose name alone could open doors, influence decisions, and shape businesses. Everyone around him admired his success, envied his wealth, and secretly wished they could live even a fraction of the life he led. His world was filled with luxury cars, grand mansions, private jets, and exclusive parties where the elite gathered to network and celebrate. On the surface, he seemed perfect, a symbol of power and achievement. People often looked at him with awe and respect, believing he had built an ideal life with everything money could buy. But behind the polished exterior, the tycoon's life was not as simple as it appeared. At home, there were hidden tensions and unspoken secrets. His mansion, which gleamed with chandeliers and fine furniture, held a quiet unease in its corners. The staff moved carefully, respecting the rules of the household while keeping their eyes open for anything unusual. Every room seemed immaculate, but not everything was as flawless as it seemed. The tycoon had a wife who was elegant, charming, and mysterious. She was the kind of woman who drew attention wherever she went, with her sophisticated style and graceful demeanor, but there was always something hidden behind her smile, something that even the closest friends couldn't fully understand. The couple had a young daughter, a little girl who was believed by everyone to be blind. She was gentle, quiet, and often seemed lost in her own world, depending on others to guide her through the house and the gardens. People who visited often pitied her, offering sympathy for her condition. They assumed she had a rare eye condition that left her sightless, never questioning it because the family's wealth and social position made everyone hesitant to interfere. The little girl seemed sweet and innocent, and her supposed blindness became part of the family's public story, a story that made outsiders respect the tycoon even more for his devotion as a father. Yet, not everything was as it seemed. There were moments that didn't fit the picture of a perfect, wealthy family. The staff noticed subtle things, small changes in the girl's behavior, moments when she seemed unusually alert or aware of things that someone blind wouldn't normally notice. Whispers passed quietly among the maids and drivers, but nobody dared to question the family directly. The tycoon himself seemed absorbed in his work most of the time, traveling between offices and boardrooms, making deals worth millions, and attending events where his influence mattered more than his family life. He trusted his wife to manage the household and care for their daughter, never imagining that appearances could hide a secret so shocking. Life in the mansion was like a carefully orchestrated performance. Every guest saw the smiling faces, the perfect parties, the elegant dinners. Nobody suspected that beneath the surface, small tensions brewed like hidden currents in calm water. The daughter's supposed blindness became a mask, and the family's reputation depended on maintaining the illusion. The tycoon believed that wealth and power could protect them from the outside world, but the truth, as it often does, had a way of creeping quietly into even the most controlled lives. The boy who would eventually confront this secret had noticed these subtle signs long before anyone else did. He was observant, curious, and brave in a way that adults often forgot to be. While others accepted the story at face value, he couldn't ignore the strange patterns, the little inconsistencies, the things that just didn't make sense. In his mind, questions began forming that he couldn't let go of. Why did the girl react to light in ways a blind person shouldn't? Why did her mother insist on certain routines that seemed unnecessary? These questions stirred his imagination and awakened a sense of responsibility. He felt a pull to uncover the truth, not out of malice, but because he could sense that someone was being wronged, someone innocent. And so, while the tycoon continued to live his life of power, luxury, and influence, the stage was quietly being set for a confrontation that would shatter the carefully maintained illusion. The mansion, with all its opulence and grandeur, hid secrets that even the tycoon could not yet imagine. The story of wealth, appearances, and control was about to collide with a truth that had been waiting patiently to emerge. In this world of glittering success and hidden shadows, the lives of the tycoon, his wife, and their daughter were on the brink of a revelation that would change everything, and it all began with someone noticing the small things that everyone else chose to ignore. While the tycoon lived in a world of luxury and control, there was one observer who saw things differently. The boy, young yet sharp beyond his years, had always been curious about the mansion and its secrets. He wasn't part of the family, but he visited often, spending time with the daughter in the gardens, helping her with little tasks, and sharing stories. To others, he was just a friendly presence, a child like any other, playful and kind. But his mind worked differently. He noticed details that others overlooked, patterns that seemed small but strange, and moments that felt like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be solved. From the moment he first met the little girl, something about her behavior caught his attention. People said she couldn't see, yet she seemed to respond to things she shouldn't have known about. A bird perched near the window, a shadow crossing the hallway, she would react, sometimes smiling or moving in a way that made him pause. At first, he dismissed it, thinking it was coincidence or luck. But as days turned into weeks, these moments repeated. The girl wasn't blind in the way everyone believed, and the boy's curiosity deepened. He began paying closer attention, watching the interactions between the girl and her mother. The mother, elegant and controlling, had routines and habits that seemed odd to an outsider. She was careful about what the girl ate, how she moved, and even when she slept. At times, she whispered instructions to the girl or handed her small things without explanation. These moments didn't sit right with the boy. He had a gut feeling that something was being hidden, something important, and he couldn't shake it off. The boy was smart, but he was also cautious. He knew that confronting adults, especially someone as powerful as the Tycoon or his wife, wasn't easy. He began observing quietly, making mental notes of everything he saw. He noticed that the staff seemed nervous, always careful not to speak too loudly or reveal too much. He watched the little girl closely, seeing subtle hints that contradicted the story everyone told. Sometimes she would move with precision, reach for objects without hesitation, or react to events before anyone mentioned them. Each small clue was like a spark, slowly lighting up the truth in his mind. Even his friends at school noticed his seriousness. While other kids played without care, he spent his time thinking, reflecting, and making sense of the unusual things he had witnessed. He didn't share his suspicions with anyone. He knew that adults would dismiss him, and gossip could complicate matters. He wanted proof, certainty, something concrete before he said a word. And so, he became patient, learning to watch, to wait, and to understand. The boy also began noticing the tension between the Tycoon and his wife. While outsiders saw a perfect couple, he sensed subtle cracks. Arguments that were hidden behind closed doors, moments of fear in the mother's eyes, and gestures that hinted at control rather than love. The household was filled with secrets, and the boy realized that discovering the truth wouldn't just reveal one small lie, it could unravel an entire world of deception. What fascinated him most was the daughter herself. Despite the control and secrecy, she had a spark, a glimmer of awareness that shouldn't have been possible. The boy felt a strange mix of anger and sadness. Someone so young was living a life carefully manipulated by others, and it wasn't fair. He promised himself that if he could, he would uncover the truth and set things right. His courage wasn't loud or boastful, it was quiet, persistent, and unwavering. Little did he know, his observations were just the beginning. Each small discovery, each oddity he noticed, was building toward a moment that would shock everyone. While the Tycoon continued his life of power and influence, and his wife maintained her careful control, the boy's mind worked silently, piecing together clues and preparing for a confrontation that no one could ignore. In his innocence and determination, he carried the power to change everything, and soon, the truth he had been quietly gathering would demand to be heard. In a world where appearances ruled and secrets were carefully hidden, the boy became the one who could see through the lies. His perspective, sharp and unyielding, was the spark that would ignite a revelation no one in the mansion could ever forget. The stage was set, and the observer was ready, quietly watching, learning, and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal what everyone else was blind to. After weeks of observing the mansion quietly, the boy's curiosity had grown into something deeper, an unshakable suspicion. The little girl's behavior continued to contradict what everyone else believed. She wasn't blind, not truly. And the boy was determined to find out why everyone, including her own father, had been misled. Each day, each small detail added another piece to the puzzle, and he knew he needed answers before he could act. He began his investigation carefully, knowing that any overt questions could alarm the adults. He started observing patterns. Every morning, the mother had strict routines. She would give the daughter small capsules or drops, insist on specific movements, and guide her through tasks in a way that seemed unnatural. Sometimes, the girl reacted too quickly to sounds, objects, or light, reacting in ways a blind child could not. The boy memorized each of these moments, storing them like clues in a mental notebook. The staff, too, drew his attention. They were polite, loyal, and cautious. They moved carefully around the house, speaking in hushed tones when no one was watching, and often exchanged glances that seemed loaded with unspoken concern. The boy noticed that some of the servants avoided eye contact with the mother and the daughter when the routine was in progress. He realized that the people closest to the secret were aware of it but too afraid to speak. This only made him more determined. He also began to pay attention to the daughter herself. While she appeared calm and compliant in public, the boy noticed fleeting moments of awareness and intelligence that didn't match the story of blindness. Sometimes, she reached for objects before they were mentioned, or smiled at things that no one had described to her. Other times, she hesitated when her mother's instructions conflicted with what her instincts told her. Each small reaction was a silent message, a hint that the truth was hidden somewhere within the careful control imposed on her. The boy became methodical. He noted times, places, and actions, mentally mapping every strange occurrence. He compared these to what he knew about blind children and noticed differences that confirmed his suspicions. This was not natural behavior, it was being influenced, controlled, and, in some subtle ways, manipulated. Yet, he was careful not to jump to conclusions. He wanted proof, something undeniable, before confronting anyone. Curiosity turned into courage. One afternoon, while the mother was occupied in another part of the house, the boy tested small experiments. He placed objects within reach of the daughter without her mother noticing, observing how she responded. Each reaction only strengthened his suspicion, the girl could see. She had been deliberately misled, and someone had been controlling her perception of the world. The truth was closer than ever, waiting to be revealed. As he continued, the boy realized the enormity of what he was uncovering. This was not just a small deception, it was a carefully hidden secret, one that affected the daughter's entire life. Someone had gone to great lengths to maintain control, and the consequences were severe. Yet the boy did not falter. He understood that uncovering the truth would require patience, courage, and careful planning. He had already taken the first steps by noticing the patterns, observing without interference, and documenting everything in his mind. By the end of this period of investigation, the boy had enough evidence to approach the Tycoon. He knew that the truth was powerful, that it could shock even the most influential and confident adults. And though he was only a child, he realized that his observations, his courage, and his persistence had given him a responsibility. Someone had to speak, and he had to be the one to do it. The boy now stood at the threshold of confrontation, holding the pieces of a secret that would change the lives of everyone in the mansion forever. In the quiet of the mansion, among the servants who whispered and the daughter who silently observed, the boy had become more than just a visitor. He had become a detective, a witness, and a voice for truth. The careful investigation, the hours of observation, and the courage to question everything had prepared him for the moment when he would finally reveal what no one else had dared to see. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. And soon, the secrets hidden behind wealth, influence, and appearances would be brought into the light. The boy had been watching, thinking, and quietly piecing together the puzzle for weeks. Every little detail, the daughter's unusual reactions, the mother's secretive behavior, the staff's hushed whispers, had brought him to one undeniable conclusion. Something was very wrong, and it was time to face the truth. He knew that confronting the powerful Tycoon would not be easy, but he also knew that staying silent would only allow the deception to continue. His courage, though quiet, had grown stronger than his fear. One evening, when the mansion was calm and the tycoon had returned from a long day of meetings, the boy decided to act. He found the billionaire in his study, a room lined with expensive books, awards, and photographs of a perfect family that now felt increasingly like a mask. The tycoon looked up from his papers, smiling politely at the boy as if expecting nothing but polite chatter. The boy took a deep breath, his heart racing, and began to speak carefully, choosing his words with precision. "Sir," he said softly, "I need to tell you something important about your daughter." The tycoon raised an eyebrow, amused and curious. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands, thinking this was just a child's innocent observation. He did not yet realize that the boy was holding a truth powerful enough to shake the foundations of his entire family. The boy paused, gathering every piece of courage he had. He looked into the tycoon's eyes, steady and unwavering, and said, "Your daughter isn't blind. It's your wife who put something in her." The words hung in the air, shocking in their weight and clarity. The tycoon's smile vanished. The paper in his hand trembled slightly as he tried to process what he had just heard. The room, once calm, seemed suddenly heavy with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. For a moment, there was silence. The tycoon's mind raced. He wanted to reject the words, to dismiss them as the imagination of a child. But deep down, a flicker of doubt began to grow, fueled by all the subtle inconsistencies he had ignored. The boy, sensing the gravity of the moment, continued carefully. He described the things he had observed, the daughter's reactions, the mother's routines, the small objects handed to her with secrecy. Every detail was a thread pulling the tycoon toward an uncomfortable truth he had never dared to imagine. The tycoon's face darkened with a mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. How could something so hidden have gone unnoticed for so long? He had trusted his wife completely, assumed her intentions were pure, and never questioned the story of their daughter's blindness. Yet, the boy's words were precise, logical, and impossible to ignore. The innocence of youth had exposed a reality that the world of adults, power, and wealth had failed to see. The boy, though nervous, remained calm. He knew that fear could weaken his message, and he refused to let it. He had spent weeks preparing mentally for this moment, understanding that truth and courage were stronger than silence. "I didn't want to say this," he added, "but someone has to know. She needs help, and she deserves the truth." The tycoon's hands clenched into fists, and he stood up, pacing the study, struggling to comprehend the enormity of the revelation. In that room, the dynamic of power shifted. The boy, small and seemingly powerless, had become the catalyst for change. The tycoon, once untouchable, was forced to confront a reality he had avoided. The confrontation was not loud or violent, but it carried a weight that no money, status, or influence could counter. The truth had been spoken, and now it demanded attention. By the end of that tense evening, the tycoon realized something crucial: appearances, wealth, and influence could not hide the truth forever. The boy had opened a door that could never be closed again. And as the first seeds of confrontation took root, the mansion, the family, and the carefully maintained illusions were about to enter a new chapter, one where secrets would be revealed, and justice, long delayed, could finally begin. The air in the tycoon's study was thick with tension, heavy enough to feel like it pressed against the walls. The boy's words had landed like a sudden thunderclap, breaking the quiet routine of the mansion and shattering the illusion of perfection. "Your daughter isn't blind, it's your wife who put something in," he had said, and the tycoon's world, carefully built on appearances and control, trembled. The billionaire sat frozen for a moment, unable to speak, unable to even breathe properly. How could this be possible? The words seemed impossible, yet they carried a weight and clarity he could not ignore. At first, disbelief took over. The tycoon wanted to shout, to dismiss it as a child's imagination. But as he looked at the boy, he noticed the determination in his eyes, the unwavering courage that could not be faked. Every detail the boy had observed, every strange reaction of the daughter, every secretive action of the mother, suddenly began to fall into place in his mind. The inconsistencies he had ignored for so long, the little moments that never made sense, were now screaming the truth at him. He stood up abruptly, pacing the room, his mind spinning. Memories of the past months and years flashed before him, the daughter reacting to shadows, to light, to sounds, even to things she shouldn't have noticed. The excuses he had accepted, the reassurances his wife had given, suddenly seemed hollow. A cold realization settled over him, the truth had been hidden in plain sight, and he had been blind to it, trusting the wrong person completely. The boy remained calm, even as the Tycoon's anger and confusion grew. He described the subtle things he had seen, the way the mother controlled her daughter, the routines that seemed unnatural, the small objects given to her with secrecy. Every detail, meticulously noted, painted a picture that was impossible to deny. The Tycoon's face paled as he began to connect the dots, realizing the depth of deception. The mansion, the wealth, the carefully maintained image of a perfect family, all of it had been a stage for something far more sinister than he had imagined. And then came the moment of full realization. The Tycoon's hands trembled as he sank into his chair, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him. The woman he had trusted completely, the partner he had believed shared his life and values, had hidden a truth so dark and cruel that it threatened to destroy the family from within. The daughter, so innocent and pure, had been manipulated in ways he could barely comprehend. The boy's revelation had pulled back the veil, exposing a reality he had never wanted to face. Anger surged next, sharp and consuming. He felt fury toward the wife for the deception, for the control, for the damage done to their daughter. But beneath the anger was something even stronger, sorrow. Sorrow for the lost moments, the innocence stolen, the trust betrayed. The mansion, once a place of opulence and pride, now felt like a cage built on lies. The Tycoon realized that money, influence, and power could not protect the truth from surfacing. No amount of wealth could erase what had been done. The boy, though small and young, had become the voice of justice. His courage, honesty, and keen observation had forced the Tycoon to confront a reality he had avoided for years. The revelation was not just shocking, it was transformative. It demanded action, demanded attention, and demanded change. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. The Tycoon, once untouchable, now faced the challenge of addressing a hidden injustice, one that had been carefully concealed behind the veneer of family, wealth, and social respectability. By the end of the evening, the mansion was silent in a new way, heavy with the weight of uncovered secrets. The Tycoon sat in thought, realizing that life could never return to the way it had been. The boy's revelation had set in motion a series of events that would expose every hidden truth, force every secret into the open, and demand accountability from those who had hidden behind lies for too long. The daughter, finally seen for who she truly was, could begin a journey of healing. And the Tycoon, confronted with the shocking reality of betrayal within his own home, knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The revelation was more than just words, it was the beginning of a reckoning. The boy's bravery had turned the tide, and the truth, long concealed, was now unstoppable. In the grand mansion of wealth, luxury, and appearances, the first cracks had appeared, and a storm was quietly building, a storm that would bring secrets into the light and change the family forever. The shocking words the boy had spoken hung in the mansion like a storm cloud that refused to pass. The Tycoon sat in his study, mind racing, heart pounding, struggling to understand the depth of the revelation. The daughter, the innocent little girl he had cherished and protected, had been living a life carefully controlled and manipulated by the person he trusted most, his own wife. Every smile, every gentle gesture she had made, every moment he had believed was natural, now felt tainted by deception. He knew he had to confront his wife. The thought made him uneasy, but there was no turning back. The truth demanded to be uncovered. The Tycoon walked through the grand hallways of the mansion, each step heavy with tension. The walls, once symbols of wealth and security, now seemed to close in with the weight of hidden secrets. His wife was in the sitting room, arranging flowers in a vase, her posture calm, her expression carefully composed. But the Tycoon knew that behind her serene facade lay a web of lies she had spun for years. "Why?" he demanded, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Why have you hidden the truth from me, from everyone?" His wife paused, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, quickly replaced by her usual controlled smile. She did not speak immediately, as if carefully weighing her words. The Tycoon's gaze never wavered, and the tension in the room thickened with every passing second. Slowly, reluctantly, the wife began to explain. She spoke in quiet tones, attempting to justify her actions, painting a story of fear, control, and twisted protection. She claimed she wanted to shield their daughter from some imagined danger, to control her world so nothing could harm her. But the truth, as the Tycoon now realized, was far darker than he could have imagined. The care had been manipulation, the routines had been control, and every secret act had stolen pieces of the little girl's life. The daughter, sensing the tension, watched silently from a distance. Her eyes, so observant, betrayed no fear, only a quiet curiosity, as if she already knew the truth but had waited for it to be spoken aloud. The Tycoon's heart ached as he realized how much his daughter had suffered, hidden behind a lie that no one had questioned, until now. The boy, standing nearby, watched the unfolding drama with a mixture of anxiety and determination. His role had begun as an observer, but now he had become a catalyst for change. His courage had forced the hidden truth into the open, and the consequences were unfolding before him. Every secret the wife had carefully kept was now being unraveled, exposed to the light. The mansion seemed to hold its breath as the Tycoon demanded answers to every question he had ignored for years. Small details that once seemed insignificant, the unusual routines, the unexplained reactions, the objects hidden from sight, were all revealed as pieces of a larger, more disturbing puzzle. Each confession, each explanation, stripped away layers of illusion, exposing the reality that had been carefully hidden. Anger and sorrow battled within the Tycoon. Anger at the betrayal, at the deception, at the years lost to manipulation. Sorrow for his daughter, who had unknowingly been trapped in a world controlled by someone she should have trusted completely. And beneath it all, a growing resolve to protect her, to make things right, and to ensure that the lies would never harm her again. By the end of that tense evening, the mansion was no longer a place of calm perfection. Secrets that had festered in silence were now exposed, shaking the foundations of every relationship within its walls. The wife's carefully constructed control had been dismantled, her power over the household broken. The daughter, finally freed from the hidden constraints, could begin to experience life on her own terms. The Tycoon, once consumed by power and appearances, now understood the true value of vigilance, courage, and truth. The boy's observations, his bravery, had revealed the cracks in a world that seemed untouchable. And as the night fell over the mansion, it was clear that life would never return to what it once was. The past could not be erased, but the future, now illuminated by truth, held the promise of justice, healing, and a family rebuilt on honesty rather than illusion. The mansion that once gleamed with luxury and perfection now felt heavy with tension. The shocking truth had been revealed, and nothing could return it to the shadows. The Tycoon's world of control, wealth, and influence had been shaken to its core. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper reminders of what had been hidden for so long. The daughter, once believed to be blind, was now free from the manipulation that had governed her life. But freedom alone could not erase the past. There were consequences to face, decisions to make, and justice to be served. The Tycoon knew that protecting his daughter was the first and most urgent responsibility. He wanted to shield her from further harm, to rebuild her trust, and to create a safe space where she could live without fear. The innocence of childhood, lost for so long, could now begin to be restored. Every gesture, every word, every moment had to be approached with care. He spent hours with her, talking, observing, and simply being present in ways he hadn't been able to before. Slowly, the little girl began to respond, not as someone forced to obey, but as someone discovering life on her own terms. The wife, however, could no longer hide behind charm or control. The tycoon confronted her fully, demanding accountability for her actions. The consequences were unavoidable. Legal authorities were involved, the staff spoke openly for the first time, and the truth spread quickly through the channels that wealth and influence could no longer contain. The deception that had seemed so carefully hidden was now exposed, leaving no room for excuses or denial. Justice, long delayed, was finally moving forward. The tycoon faced a mixture of emotions, anger at the betrayal, sorrow for the years stolen from his daughter, and determination to ensure that no harm could come again. The mansion, once a symbol of power, now became a place of reckoning. Meetings with lawyers, discussions with counselors, and careful planning for the daughter's well-being filled his days. Each step was a balance between punishment for wrongdoing and protection for the innocent. The boy, whose bravery had begun this chain of events, watched quietly, proud that his courage had sparked change. Outside the mansion, the story rippled through society. Friends, colleagues, and even rivals could no longer ignore what had happened. The wife's influence crumbled as those who had once admired her power and elegance now questioned her integrity. The tycoon's image, surprisingly, did not suffer. Instead, he gained respect for facing the truth, taking responsibility, and acting decisively to protect his family. What had begun as scandal turned into a narrative of accountability, courage, and moral strength. The daughter, though young, began to understand the magnitude of what had occurred. Slowly, under the careful guidance of her father and the boy who had revealed the truth, she learned that life could be different. She could make choices, express herself freely, and live without fear of hidden control. Each small victory, her laughter, her curiosity, her confidence, felt monumental after years of manipulation. The mansion, once a place of hidden shadows, started to feel alive again with hope. Even the boy, now recognized as more than a visitor or family friend, realized the impact of his actions. His courage had not only revealed a terrible secret but had sparked justice that would protect a life from further harm. He understood the power of observation, honesty, and bravery, lessons that would stay with him forever. By the end of this chapter, the tycoon, his daughter, and the boy had taken the first steps toward healing. The mansion, though still filled with memories of betrayal, began to transform into a place of truth, safety, and new beginnings. The consequences had been faced, justice had been served, and the family had been given a chance to rebuild, not on wealth or appearances, but on honesty, trust, and courage. The story of betrayal, courage, and revelation had reached its critical turning point. It was a story that would be remembered, not for the darkness that had existed, but for the bravery that uncovered it, the justice that followed, and the hope that now had a chance to grow. The world of wealth and power had been shaken, but the heart of the story, the protection of the innocent, the triumph of truth, and the power of one courageous voice, remained unbroken. The mansion was quiet now, but it was a different kind of quiet, one that felt lighter, freer, and filled with possibilities. The storm of secrets, lies, and deception that had once haunted its walls had passed, leaving behind the opportunity for healing. The tycoon sat in the study, looking out at the gardens bathed in the soft glow of the evening sun. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of clarity. The past could not be changed, but the future, finally, could be shaped with truth, care, and love. His daughter, once trapped in a carefully controlled world, was beginning to rediscover life. Each smile, each small step of independence, each laugh that echoed through the halls reminded him that courage and honesty had the power to change everything. She explored the mansion with a new awareness, touching the flowers in the garden, listening to the sounds of the birds, and moving freely without fear of the routines that had bound her for so long. Her world was no longer dictated by manipulation, it belonged to her. The boy, whose bravery had sparked the chain of revelations, remained close, now more than a visitor or observer, he had become a quiet hero in the lives of the father and daughter. His courage had exposed the truth when no adult dared, and now he watched as the family took its first steps toward a future unburdened by lies. The tycoon often spoke to him, not just with gratitude, but with genuine respect, acknowledging that wisdom, honesty, and courage can come from the youngest of voices. The mother's presence, once so commanding in the mansion, was now absent. The consequences of her actions had been faced, and justice had been served. While the Tycoon never wished harm upon anyone, he understood that protecting his daughter meant creating distance from those who could bring her danger. The past could not be erased, but its shadows could be replaced with care, safety, and love. Every member of the household had felt the weight of change, and slowly, the mansion began to feel alive again, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a home built on truth. In the weeks that followed, the family found small ways to reconnect and rebuild. Dinner conversations became moments of genuine connection rather than routines of pretense. Walks in the garden were filled with laughter, curiosity, and wonder. The Tycoon discovered the simple joy of presence, no longer consumed by appearances or the opinions of society. He learned that protecting what mattered most required honesty, courage, and humility, not wealth or influence. The daughter, too, began to express herself in ways she had never been allowed. Her curiosity flourished, her voice grew stronger, and her confidence bloomed. She began to trust the world and the people around her, and with each passing day, the memory of the control and manipulation faded into lessons of resilience. The boy, sitting nearby one afternoon as she chased butterflies in the garden, smiled quietly. He had not imagined the full impact of his observations, but seeing the light return to her life was more rewarding than he could have ever anticipated. The Tycoon often reflected on the journey, realizing that true power was not wealth, influence, or control, it was the ability to recognize truth, to act courageously, and to protect innocence. The experience had taught him that no amount of status could shield anyone from deception, but honesty, vigilance, and bravery could restore what had been broken. The mansion, once a gilded cage of secrets, had transformed into a home of trust, care, and hope. As the sun set over the estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Tycoon, his daughter, and the boy stood together in the garden. The past had left its mark, but it no longer defined them. They had faced lies, betrayal, and manipulation, but they had also discovered courage, truth, and the power of speaking out. In that quiet moment, the mansion was no longer just a building of wealth, it was a home where honesty and love triumphed, where lessons had been learned, and where the future could finally be bright. The story had come full circle. The secrets were exposed, justice had been served, and healing had begun. What remained was hope, the hope that courage can illuminate the darkest truths, that honesty can overcome deception, and that even the smallest voice can change a life forever. In the end, the Tycoon, his daughter, and the boy learned that life, though unpredictable and sometimes cruel, could also be fair, loving, and filled with new beginnings.